Welcome to The Deep Dive, the podcast where we sweat the small stuff so you don't have to. From real stories to expert advice, we're here to uncover everything about hyperhidrosis and empower you to take control. Ready to dive into the world of sweat and solutions? Let's make a splash.
Welcome to today's Deep Dive. We like to go beyond simple explanations, and today we're doing exactly that by delving into the world of hyperhidrosis. But we're not focusing on clinical definitions this time around. Instead, we're going to be hearing from Martin Kim, founder of Hyperhidrosis Awareness Kenya, and really getting into the nitty-gritty of personal experiences. His YouTube video, Treatment Process and Progress, is packed with insights and practical tips. And did you know that even the type of sock material you choose can make a huge difference?
I think one of the most fascinating things about Martin's approach is that it's all about taking control. It's not just about managing sweat, but managing your mindset.
Absolutely. He talks a lot about understanding your own personal sweat patterns, which I think is so important.
Right. And it's something that we can all do, like being self-aware, Yeah. When are you most likely to sweat? If you tend to sweat more during presentations or in crowded spaces, well, then you can be prepared for those situations.
Right. And you can pack an extra shirt or choose breathable fabrics, even practice some relaxation techniques beforehand.
Exactly. And I love how he connects the self-awareness to mindfulness. It's like those mindfulness exercises where you acknowledge a feeling without letting it control you.
It's about recognizing, okay, I feel the sweat coming on, but I'm not going to let it derail me.
And the more you practice this, the less power those sensations have over you.
Now, one of the things that surprised me was that Martin hasn't tried every topical treatment out there. You might think that someone so focused on managing hyperhidrosis would have experimented with everything.
It's a really important point, because managing hyperhidrosis is such a personal journey. What works for one person might not work for another.
Totally. So it's about finding what works for you, and that might mean trying different approaches or combining strategies.
Absolutely. He has a really interesting perspective on the mind-body connection as well. He says, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he tries to distract himself and not stress about sweating, because the more he focuses on it, the worse it gets. There's actually a scientific basis for that. Psychodermatology explores the link between our mental and emotional states and skin health, and studies suggest that stress and anxiety can really make things like hyperhidrosis worse.
So it's not just in our heads, our thoughts can actually trigger physical symptoms.
It's a two-way street. Our thoughts and emotions can influence our physical well-being and vice versa.
Wow.
It seems like Martin is intuitively tapping into this by using distraction techniques.
When I find myself getting anxious about sweating, I try to shift my focus, Sometimes I'll listen to music or strike up a conversation. I might even just focus on my breathing.
I find deep breathing exercises are incredibly helpful. Even just a few deep breaths can calm the nervous system and bring a sense of control.
It's like giving your mind a break from the worry cycle.
Exactly. And the more you practice these techniques, the easier it becomes to access them in challenging moments.
It's really interesting because Martin mentions that he wants to explore this further. He wants to make a video in the future about the subconscious mind and its connection to hyperhidrosis. What role does our subconscious play in all of this?
That's a fascinating area to consider. What if we could tap into the power of our subconscious to help us manage hyperhidrosis?
Definitely. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the social aspects of hyperhidrosis. Martin shares this story about people being surprised that he has the condition because he doesn't smell.
This highlights a really common misconception. People associate sweating with body odor, but that's not always the case. Hyperhidrosis is about excessive sweating, which may or may not be accompanied by odor.
And it's so important to differentiate between sweat caused by hygiene issues and sweat caused by a medical condition like hyperhidrosis. Martin uses these situations as opportunities to educate others. He explains what hyperhidrosis is.
That's fantastic. He's turning a potentially awkward moment into a chance to raise awareness and combat stigma.
It's inspiring.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how you can use your own experiences to educate others and advocate for greater understanding.
We all have a role to play in creating a more informed and compassionate world.
Now, before we move on to part 2, let's talk about some of the practical tips Martin shares. And we'll start with something that might seem surprisingly simple, but can make a huge difference. Martin really emphasizes choosing the right socks. He recommends natural fibers like cotton, bamboo, or wool. It's all about breathability.
Such a basic thing, but it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, your feet are enclosed in shoes all day, so giving them a chance to breathe can really help regulate temperature.
Right. It can really minimize that sweating.
It's like he's saying, start with the foundation,
Yeah.
and then build from there. And it makes me think about all those little choices we make that can actually have a big impact on how much we sweat.
Absolutely.
Like even the type of shoes we wear.
He talks about the importance of good quality shoes,
Right.
ones that are appropriate for the season. He even warns against wearing winter boots in summer.
Yeah, we've all been there, sacrificing comfort for fashion.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with hyperhidrosis, those choices matter.
They do, and it's not just about avoiding boots in the heat. It's about breathable materials like leather and making sure your shoes fit properly so they don't constrict your feet,
And he also really stresses keeping your feet clean.
especially between the toes.
He suggests using a small microfiber cloth or a dedicated foot applicator.
It's easy to overlook those areas, but they can harbor bacteria if not cleaned properly.
For sure. Okay, so I want to go back to something we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
That whole thing with the subconscious mind and its connection to hyperhidrosis.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Well, our subconscious is constantly processing information and influencing our thoughts and feelings.
Right.
It's like the autopilot of our brain.
So could we be subconsciously triggering our own sweat response?
It's certainly possible, if we've developed negative associations with sweating, our subconscious mind might be on high alert, looking for those situations that can make us sweat.
So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
So how do we address those subconscious beliefs?
That's where things like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, can be helpful.
Well,
It helps you identify and challenge negative thought patterns.
so instead of thinking, oh no, I'm going to sweat, you try to reframe that thought.
Exactly. You try to replace those negative thoughts with positive ones.
And over time, you can retrain your brain.
It can be challenging, but it's possible.
And there are other tools that can help too, right? Like mindfulness and meditation.
Yes.
I've heard those can help with managing stress and anxiety. But how would they apply to hyperhidrosis?
Well, mindfulness is all about paying attention to the present moment without judgment. So instead of getting caught up in worrying about sweating, you simply observe the sensations.
You don't attach any negative emotions to them,
And the more you practice, the more easily you can access that sense of calm.
even in those really tough situations. Okay, so let's talk about the social stigma associated with hyperhidrosis. Martin shared that story about people being surprised he had the condition because he doesn't smell.
It's a great example of how common misconceptions can be.
Right.
People often think sweating always equals body odor, but that's just not true, especially with hyperhidrosis.
It's so important to differentiate between sweat caused by hygiene issues and sweat caused by a medical condition like hyperhidrosis.
Absolutely.
What's inspiring is that Martin uses these situations as opportunities to educate. Instead of getting defensive or embarrassed, he explains what hyperhidrosis is.
It's a powerful example of advocacy.
It makes you think about how you can use your own experiences to do the same, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a big public declaration. Even just having an open conversation with a friend or colleague can make a difference.
Every conversation can chip away at that stigma,
For sure.
and it can help create more understanding.
Well, we've covered a lot in this deep dive so far, from practical tips to the power of the subconscious and the importance of education.
And there's still more to come. In part 3, we'll delve into Martin's thoughts on fragrance and managing hyperhidrosis. And we'll have some final takeaways from his journey.
So we talked about a lot of different aspects of managing hyperhidrosis, from those practical tips to the mental and social aspects. But I'm really curious to hear what Martin has to say about fragrances.
Me too. It's not something you immediately think of, in connection with hyperhidrosis, but it makes sense.
Right, because fragrance can help with odor, and it can boost confidence.
Absolutely.
He mentions that he's planning an Instagram live session, and it's going to be all about fragrances.
Oh, cool.
He's going to talk about the notes and how they work in different seasons.
It's great that he's taking this holistic approach. It's not just about masking the odor, but actually finding scents that make you feel good.
Exactly, and they complement your personal style.
Right.
What kind of recommendations do you think he'll have?
Well, I imagine he might talk about fresher, lighter scents for the warmer months,
Yeah,
maybe with some citrus or aquatic notes.
that makes sense.
And then for cooler seasons, maybe something a bit warmer.
Oh,
Yeah.
like spicier.
It's like another tool in your arsenal,
Yeah.
another way to take control.
Right.
It's about finding what works for you,
Exactly, and it might be different for everyone.
whether it's socks or mindfulness or fragrances.
It's that personal journey we were talking about.
I'm so impressed by Martin's dedication to this. He's really trying to share his knowledge and empower others.
It's inspiring for sure.
He's taken this personal challenge and made it into something really positive. He's created this platform for education and advocacy.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what do you think is the most important takeaway for our listeners?
I think it's the power of mindset. Martin's story shows us that we have a lot of control over our thoughts and feelings, and even our physical responses.
I love that. And it applies to so much more than just hyperhidrosis.
Absolutely. It's about taking care of our whole selves.
Mind and body,
Right.
and finding what works for each of us. And remember, you're not alone in this. There are so many people who understand, and there are resources available to support you.
Like Martin's YouTube channel and the International Hyperhidrosis Society.
Yes, those are great places to start.
We've covered a lot today, from practical tips to the power of the mind and the importance of community and support.
Thanks for joining us.
See you next time on The Deep Dive.
You've been listening to The Deep Dive because understanding sweat is the first step to thriving. Remember to subscribe, share, and connect with us on Hyperhidrosis Awareness Kenya's socials. Together, we can stay cool, confident, and unstoppable. Until next time, keep shining. No sweat.